Every parent on earth has made this exact meal. Ground beef, a hot pan, maybe some onions, a little salt. The kind of dinner you throw together on a Tuesday night when you're tired, when the kids are hungry, when you just need something on the table fast. You've made it. Your parents made it. There is nothing special about a hamburger. There's nothing dangerous about a hamburger. That's what David thought too. David was 41 years old, systems analyst in Portland, married 12 years to Rebecca, a 4th grade teacher, 2 kids, a golden retriever, a house in the suburbs, normal, ordinary, the kind of life you don't think twice about. Because thinking twice would mean acknowledging that at any single moment, it could all be taken away. Their younger daughter was Maya, 7 years old. She twisted a strand of hair around her finger when she concentrated. Her favorite color was yellow. She called it sunshine. She had a collection of rocks on her windowsill, each one with a name. She named pieces of the earth because she believed everything deserved to be known. This is the detail that destroys me. On June 14th, David pulled a pound of ground beef from the refrigerator. He'd bought it 3 days earlier. He formed 4 patties, sprinkled them with salt and pepper, and placed them on a hot cast iron skillet. Maya was drawing at the kitchen island, a horse that looked more like a giraffe, and David told her so, and she said, "Daddy, you don't understand art without looking up." This is the moment where the invisible thread enters the story. David cooked the burgers until they looked done. The outside was brown. The juices ran clear, but David didn't own a meat thermometer. And ground beef doesn't tell you when it's finished, it just sits there in the pan, keeping its secrets. The burgers were slightly pink in the very center. Not raw, just a little pink. The way millions of people eat them. The way you've probably eaten them, Maya put ketchup on hers. She ate the whole thing. She asked if they could have burgers again tomorrow. What David couldn't possibly have seen or smelled or tasted was that the ground beef carried Escherichia coli, O157 IRH7. It doesn't change the color of meat. It doesn't produce a smell. It doesn't alter the taste. It is completely invisible. In the center of that burger, where the temperature never reached 160 degrees Fahrenheit, the bacteria survived. Maya swallowed perhaps 10 to 100 individual bacterial cells. That's all it takes. 10 to 100 microscopic organisms passed through her mouth, down her esophagus, into her stomach. And the machinery of destruction had already begun. The first 3 days were completely quiet. Maya went to school. She fed the dog from the table when nobody was looking. She finished her rock project. David went to work. Rebecca graded spelling tests. The burgers were already forgotten, filed away in the mental drawer labeled Tuesday night dinners. You have that drawer too. Everyone does. The incubation period of E. coli O157H7 is typically 3 to 4 days. During this time, the bacteria that survived the cooking had attached themselves to the lining of Maya's colon. They were multiplying. They were producing Shiga toxin, named after Kiyoshi Shiga, the Japanese bacteriologist who first described it in 1897. The toxin is a weapon, an incredibly precise molecular machine designed to infiltrate cells and shut them down from the inside. On day 4, a Thursday, Maya told her mom her stomach felt funny. Rebecca gave her water and said she'd probably eaten too fast at breakfast. Warning sign number 1, dismissed as nothing. That afternoon, the school nurse called. Stomach pain, low-grade fever. Rebecca picked her up. In the car, Maya was quiet, head against the window. Rebecca asked if she wanted a slushie. Maya said no. Maya never said no to a slushie. Warning sign number 2, but Rebecca thought it was just a bug. Kids get sick. They bounce back. Don't overreact. By Friday, Maya was vomiting. Then came the diarrhea. Urgent, painful waves. David came home early. They called the pediatrician. The nurse said it sounded like a stomach virus going around. Keep her hydrated. She'll be fine. Warning sign number 3, validated by a medical professional, dismissed with authority. That evening, Maya said her pee looked weird, darker, reddish. She'd barely used the bathroom in hours. But the pediatrician was closed for the weekend. The urgent care had a 3-hour wait, and Maya didn't look that sick. You can see every step of the staircase. You want to reach through time and shake them. But the staircase was invisible to them. It always is. Saturday morning, Maya woke up and her eyes were yellow. Jaundice. Red blood cells were being destroyed faster than her liver could process the debris. Something was already deep inside her circulatory system, ripping apart the cells that carried oxygen to her organs. At noon, Maya went to the bathroom and came out crying. There was blood. Rebecca grabbed her keys. The ER was chaos. It was a Saturday. They waited 40 minutes. By then, Maya wasn't walking. David carried her, face like candle wax, eyes unmistakably jaundiced. She hadn't urinated in nearly 24 hours. The triage nurse checked her blood pressure, 60/40. They went straight through the double doors. The ER physician, Dr. Okonkwo, ordered a full blood panel. What came back stopped her cold. Maya's platelet count, 12,000. Normal is 150 to 450,000. Red blood cells, less than half of normal. Creatinine, skyrocketing. Her kidneys were failing. Her blood was destroying itself. And the doctor knew exactly what this was. Hemolytic uremic syndrome. It's HUS. Here's what HUS does inside a human body. The Shiga toxin enters the bloodstream through the damaged lining of the colon. Once in circulation, it seeks out a specific receptor, a glycolipid called GB3. This receptor is densely concentrated on the endothelial cells lining the smallest blood vessels, and nowhere more than in the glomeruli of the kidneys. Your glomeruli are millions of microscopic sieves that filter your blood. They are delicate, precise, and covered in exactly the targets Shiga toxin is designed to attack. When Shiga toxin binds to a GB3 receptor, the cell pulls it inside. The toxin's A subunit then targets the ribosomes, the protein factories. It cleaves a single adenine molecule from the 28S ribosomal RNA. One molecule, one bond, and the entire protein synthesis machinery stops. The cell can no longer make proteins. It can no longer repair itself. Within hours, it dies. Multiply this by millions. The endothelial cells in Maya's kidney glomerulus were dying en masse. As they died, the underlying tissue was exposed, triggering the coagulation cascade. Tiny clots, microthrombi, began forming throughout her kidney vasculature. Red blood cells forced through these partially blocked vessels were sheared apart like paper through a shredder. This is microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. Under the microscope, her blood showed schistocytes, jagged little crescents of torn red cells. Meanwhile, her platelets were being consumed at catastrophic speed. Every platelet was rushing to the dying endothelial cells, forming clots. Her platelet count was in free fall. Without platelets, the blood loses its ability to clot. Spontaneous internal bleeding becomes real. Here's the greatest horror. The E. coli in that hamburger was already gone, cleared from her body days ago. What was destroying her from the inside wasn't an infection anymore. It was her own immune system, her own blood vessels, her own body, hijacked by a molecular weapon that targeted the one organ system she couldn't survive without. And there is a cruel paradox in treating this. Every instinct says, give antibiotics. But with Shiga toxin producing E. coli, antibiotics are potentially catastrophic. When certain antibiotics attack the bacterial cell wall, the bacteria rupture, releasing a massive surge of Shiga toxin all at once. You're not killing the enemy. You're triggering a suicide bombing. The one weapon you have against bacterial disease is the one weapon you cannot use. So what could they do? Support. Maya was started on continuous renal replacement therapy, 24-hour dialysis. A catheter was placed in her neck. Her blood flowed out, passed through the filter, and returned. She was connected to a machine. She received blood transfusions, platelet transfusions, given sparingly, because adding platelets to a system actively forming clots is like pouring gasoline on a fire. 17 IV lines ran into her small arms and neck. On day 3, she was placed on a ventilator. Acute respiratory distress syndrome, fluid in her lungs from the systemic inflammation. Her parents sat in vinyl chairs holding her hand. David told her about a new rock he'd found. He promised he'd give it to her when she woke up. On day 6, Maya's neurological status deteriorated. Shiga toxin doesn't only attack the kidneys. In about 20% of severe pediatric HUS cases, it crosses the blood-brain barrier. She began having seizures. The EEG showed diffuse slowing, a brain under siege. The neurologist used words like encephalopathy and poor prognosis, and David nodded and said he understood, but he didn't understand, because how could anyone understand that a hamburger their father made had led to this? The last seizure came at 2:47 in the morning. It lasted 11 minutes. Maya's brain, starved of oxygen, swollen from the inflammatory cascade, could not recover. The apnea test, no respiratory drive. 12 hours later, no brainstem reflexes, no response to pain. The EEG was flat. Maya's body was alive only because of the machines. The consciousness that named rocks and drew horses and twisted her hair, that consciousness was gone. David and Rebecca withdrew life support on a Sunday morning in late June. Sunlight came through the hospital window, the golden kind Maya would have said was her color. Rebecca held her left hand, David held her right. The ventilator was removed. Maya's heart stopped at 11:08 in the morning. She was 7. The E. coli was traced back to a specific lot of ground beef distributed across 3 states. The processing plant had failed to maintain temperature controls during grinding, a few degrees too warm, a few hours too long. The meat was recalled. Too late. 6 other people were hospitalized. No other deaths. Maya was the only one. There's a particular grief that comes from something preventable. It doesn't offer absolution. David knew, intellectually, that nearly everyone cooks ground beef the way he did. That the contamination was invisible, that the blame belonged to a plant hundreds of miles away. But none of that reaches the part of the brain that replays the memory on loop. He stood in that kitchen, he flipped those patties, he set that plate in front of his daughter. That sequence is his forever. Ground beef is the most dangerous form of beef. When you cook a steak, bacteria are on the surface. Searing kills them. But when beef is ground, the surface becomes the interior. Every grind folds contamination into the center. The only way to make a burger safe is 160 degrees Fahrenheit at the center, measured with a thermometer. Not guessed, not eyeballed, measured. One thermometer costs $8. In the months after, David became an advocate for food safety education. He speaks at local events. He tells people about meat thermometers. He tells them that color is not a reliable indicator. He tells them ground beef can look perfectly done and still harbor enough bacteria to kill a child. He tells them his daughter's name. He shows them her picture, like the one with her favorite rock. The gray one she called Thunder. The scale of it is almost absurd. 10 to 100 bacterial cells, a few degrees of heat, a toxin measured in nanograms, one modified adenine base on a ribosomal RNA molecule. Events at the molecular level, invisible to every human eye, producing a grief large enough to fill a lifetime. The hamburger was just a hamburger. The dinner was just a dinner. The Tuesday night was just a Tuesday night. Until it wasn't. David still has that cast iron skillet. He has never used it again. Sometimes, late at night, he takes it out and holds it. There's no answer in the iron. But he holds it anyway. Because the distance between just and never again is smaller than a single degree of heat.